at number 10 is Martin Luther King Jr.'s death. Martin Luther King Jr. was an American Baptist minister and activist, and one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955. Now, he died on April 4th, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, as he was assassinated. Claims soon arose over suspect aspects of King's assassination and the controversial role of the alleged assassin, James Earl Ray. Although his guilty plea eliminated the possibility of a trial before a jury, within days Ray had recanted and claimed his confession was forced. Suspicions were further raised by the confirmation of illegal surveillance of King by the FBI and the CIA, and the FBI's attempt to prompt King to end his own life. In 1979, the United States House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded that there was a likelihood of conspiracy in the assassination of King and that Ray was a scapegoat. In 1999, a mixed-race jury at a Memphis civil suit reached an anonymous verdict that King was assassinated as a result of a conspiracy involving the U.S. government. After the verdict, Coretta King said, "There is abundant evidence of a major high-level conspiracy in the assassination of my husband." The jury found the mafia and various local, state, and federal government agencies were deeply involved in the assassination, and Mr. Ray was set up to take the blame. Number 9. Brittany Murphy's death. Actress Brittany Murphy was sick with pneumonia when she collapsed in the bathroom of her home. Firefighters attempted to resuscitate her before she was transported to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but 2 hours after the initial 911 call, she died at the hospital from cardiac arrest. An autopsy determined that Brittany died of pneumonia exacerbated by anemia and multiple drug intoxication. The drugs, over-the-counter cold medicines, and prescription medications were all legal, but at elevated levels. Her husband, Simon Monjack, raised suspicions by initially refusing an autopsy to understand exactly what happened to his wife, but just 5 months later, Simon died in the same bedroom of eerily similar causes, pneumonia and anemia. He also had an elevated level of prescription drugs in his system. Many people believe that the home had toxic mold in it, and Brittany's mother dismissed this idea, as did the coroner, but she later became convinced toxic mold was the cause of the deaths while trying to sell the home. Brittany's father had a different theory, that she had her life ended by someone. I have a feeling that there was definitely a situation here. He told Good Morning America, "Yeah, it's poison, yes, I know that." The basis for this claim was the result of an independent toxicology report he had done on a sample of Brittany's hair. The report detailed the presence of 10 heavy metals in her hair, which the report claimed suggested the possibility of foul play. Her father later filed a suit against the Los Angeles coroner's office and the Los Angeles Police Department, hoping in vain to have his daughter's body re-examined and the case reopened. Number 8. Natalie Wood's death. On November 29, 1981, the actress and movie star Natalie Wood drowned while on a boating trip with her husband, Robert Wagner. Robert had reported Natalie missing after a night of drinking, and her body was found several hours later, floating face down in the water wearing a flannel nightgown, down jacket, and socks. Now, at first, her death was ruled accidental, but the bruises on her body led law enforcement to consider foul play, with Robert as the prime suspect. The couple had an argument on the yacht before she went missing, a fact Robert initially denied, but fully admitted to in his 2008 autobiography, further arousing suspicions in the fact that 4 hours had elapsed between the time Robert and Dennis Davrin, the captain, realized Natalie was missing and when they called the Coast Guard. Most concerning, though, were the statements that Lana Wood alleges the boat captain Dennis Davrin made to her on a drunken phone call. According to Lana, Dennis said that after the star couple quarreled, it appeared to him as though RJ, Robert Wagner, shoved her away and she went overboard. Dennis panicked and RJ said, "Leave her there, teach her a lesson." Lana added that Dennis didn't think Robert intended for her sister to drown, but he didn't run to her aid. Number 7. Joe Pitchler disappearance. In the late 90s and early 2000s, child and teen actor Joe Pitchler appeared in a series of small and supporting roles in a number of movies and TV shows, most notably as Brennan Newton in the Beethoven family film franchise. According to the Charlie Project, Joe spoke with a friend at about 4 a.m. on January 5, 2006 in his northeastern Washington hometown of Bremerton. A few weeks before his 19th birthday, he left his apartment untouched, unlocked, and with the lights on, and apparently took only his wallet and car keys before he disappeared without telling anyone where he might be going, apart from some poems that spoke to his depressing mindset. 4 days later, Joe's Toyota Corolla was located in Bremerton, and authorities suspected that Joe may have jumped to his death off a bridge over Port Madison Narrows, but no evidence of that nor his remains were ever recovered.
At number 6 is the Freeway Phantom. The Freeway Phantom, a mysterious and deeply unsettling case has baffled investigators for decades, which takes us on a chilling journey through the mysteries of American crime. This cold-blooded villain, harboring a seething rage against society, committed a series of heinous crimes that terrorized the Washington area. His motive is obscured in a shroud of darkness, which could be rooted in untreated psychological turmoil, perhaps depression, and definitely anger towards women. The Phantom's elusive persona, concealed behind a mask and a vehicle, suggests a methodical approach to his sinister deeds. His knowledge of the region's local stories hints at a connection to the area. The abduction and unaliving of his victims reveal a psychopathic disposition with deep-seated misogyny. The brutality of these crimes, coupled with a military-like precision, has led some to speculate about this person being a Vietnam veteran. At number 5 is the West Mesa unalivings. 11 women, their remains discovered in 2009, buried beneath a dusty New Mexico desert. It's one of those American mysteries that might never be completely unraveled. Originally, people thought it was the work of a serial unaliver, but there's a twist here. Actually, a possible connection to a trafficking ring. An anonymous tip pointed fingers at a suspect from Central America, but it doesn't stop there. Cops even suspected a trafficking ring operating through Texas, preying on people of the night during big events across the Southwest. This complex web of darkness stretches across various states, leaving us with more questions than answers. At number 4 is the Gileo Beach serial unalivings, a spine-tingling mystery that spans nearly 2 decades, casting a shadow over Long Island, New York. Between 1996 and 2011, the remains of 11 people were discovered, with the majority being workers of the night who had advertised their services on Craigslist. The grim saga began with the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert, leading to an intensive police search in the vicinity of Ocean Park near Gileo Oak Beach. In December 2010, the remains of the Gileo Four were unearthed within a quarter mile of each other, only to be followed by the discovery of 6 more sets of remains in March and April of 2011. Now, the cause of the unaliving itself remains disputed, with police proposing accidental drowning, while an independent autopsy suggested possible strangulation. In a startling twist, the arrest of Rex Hauerman in July of 2023 brought some closure to the case, as he was charged in connection with the unalivings of 3 of the Gileo Four victims, and emerged as the prime suspect in the 4th victim's demise. Yet, the lingering mystery remains. Who else might be involved, and what other horrors lie concealed in the shadows of Gileo Beach? And number 3 is the Oakland County unaliver. Between 76 and 77, 4 young people disappeared without a trace. Their bodies were later discovered, each placed in plain sight along roadways in Oakland County. This gruesome puzzle remains one of America's most unsettling unsolved mysteries. Forensic advancements have shed light on potential suspects, but they've only deepened the enigma. DNA testing indirectly implicated 2 individuals, but the main perpetrator's identity remains hidden. One suspect passed away, and the other is serving a life sentence for unrelated crimes. Even with a DNA profile of the unaliver, no match has emerged. At number 2 is the Doodler. Alright, so let's dive into one of the most unsettling unsolved mysteries in American history. Straight out of California, the Doodler. This unsettling serial unaliver terrorized San Francisco between 74 and 75, committing 6 to 16 unalivings and 3 assaults. What makes this case more chilling is how the Doodler earned his name. See, before brutally impaling his victims, he would sketch them. The victims were all men, and the suspect targeted them after meeting at gay nightclubs, bars, and restaurants. The disturbing patterns of the victims being stabbed in similar locations adds another layer to the mystery. Despite police efforts, the Doodler was never caught. At number 1 is Charlie Chop-Off. Now, if you think serial unalivings are the stuff of movies and TV shows, think again. Charlie Chop-Off is an unidentified serial unaliver who terrorized the streets of Manhattan from 72 to 73. What makes this case even more unsettling was the gruesome nature of the crimes. See, Chop-Off's signature move was you could probably guess or Google it. I wouldn't recommend it. Imagine the fear that gripped the city during those days. Despite a suspect, Erno Sato, confessing to one of the unalivings, he was deemed unfit for trial and sent back to a mental institution, leaving the case open and the mystery unsolved. The question remains, who was Charlie Chop-Off? And will we ever uncover the truth behind these horrific crimes?
Coming into number 10, we have Where is Cynthia? This is a very bizarre missing persons case that was also featured on US TV show Unsolved Mysteries. Cynthia Anderson was a legal secretary from Ohio in 1980. The 20-year-old loved crime and romance novels, but began having a reoccurring dream that an intruder entered her home. She told her mother about it, but she didn't think too much of it until she started receiving weird phone calls at work. Her employers even went as far as to have an emergency buzzer installed on her desk. On the morning of August 4th, 1981, she wasn't at work, but her car was in the car park. On her desk was a novel that she was reading, but the page page was open on a passage that detailed an abduction. A month later, the local police started getting weird calls saying that Cynthia was being held in a basement, but wouldn't give any further detail. To this day, she's never been found, and that case is cold. Coming into number 9, we have Who Shot Tupac? But like, who? Tupac Shakur was one of the most famous rappers in the world when he was killed in Las Vegas in September 1996, nearly 23 years ago to the day. He was just 25 years old when he was gunned down in Vegas, having seen Mike Tyson and Frank Bruno fight, which must have been epic. As Tupac and his entourage stopped at a red light in the Flamenco Road and Koval Lane area, he was shot 4 times. He died 6 days later and was not in a state to identify his killer. Earlier that night, it was reported that the rapper had beef with the street gang, the Crips. They could have had something to do with it, we'll just never know. A witness came forward, but then they were murdered in New Jersey, thousands of miles away, before they could even submit to further police questioning and identify a suspect. Of course, there are people out there that still believe Tupac is alive and living under a new identity. Perhaps we'll never know. Coming into number 8, we have the Children of Hamelin. So you guys may have heard of the Pied Piper, a little fairy tale with a pretty key moral at the end of it. Pay your bills, if not a bohemian musician will steal your kids. Right? Well, it turns out that there is more than just a lesson to this story. There is actually an 800-year-old unsolved mystery. You see, the Pied Piper of Hamelin was actually a real man, a piper dressed in exuberant clothing who turned up in Lower Saxony in the village of Saxon itself in 1284. According to church records, he did steal 130 children from the town who were never seen or heard from again. They were simply spirited away. But were they? We just don't know. Coming into number 7, we have Stonehenge. We're taking it back to my home country of England, but what is going on? What's going on with Stonehenge? I don't know. Stonehenge sits pretty in the Salisbury Plains in England and was laid out around 4,000 years ago at a time where transporting and lifting 50-ton sarsen sandstone and bluestone rocks was legitimately beyond human capability. Aside from the mystery of how it was built, we also don't know what it was used for. The main theory is that it was for some kind of religious worship, although there were far more cosmic suggestions. The structure is aligned with various celestial objects and has been the focus of pagan celebration, especially around the summer solstice. Archaeological digs have also suggested that a breed of giant cows were used either to assist in the construction or, were just chilling there, present, mooing. Cows are just so great. Does anyone ever just stop and think about cows? I love cows, even ancient giant cows. Cows! Moo. Recently discovered underneath the stone structure were 17 further mysterious ancient monuments, which just adds more mystery to the pile of mystery. It's a mystery sundae with a side of mystery. And a mystery cherry on top.
Number 6. Brian Jones's death. Brian Jones was a musician, songwriter, and record producer. Around midnight on July 2nd, 1969, his body was discovered at the bottom of the swimming pool at his estate. He was pulled from the pool and had CPR performed on him, but was pronounced dead upon arriving at the hospital. Now, Brian's death came just 6 weeks after Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Charlie Watts informed him he was out of the band. Accounts of the night Brian died say that prior to him going for a swim, he had been drinking brandy and taking sleeping pills, and as a result was unsteady on his feet and his speech was garbled. An autopsy declared his death was due to drowning, later clarified as death by misadventure. His daughter, though, Barbara Marion, contends that her father may have had his life ended by someone on purpose and believes that his death was never properly investigated by the authorities. Rumors have alleged for years that Frank Thorogood, a builder who was working on Brian's house who was the last person to see him alive, may have ended his life after a dispute over money. Number 5. Marilyn Monroe's death. The world was shaken on August 5th, 1962 when Marilyn Monroe was found dead at the age of 36 in her home in Los Angeles. The cause? A barbiturate overdose that was ruled as her most likely taking her own life. Now, this led many to doubt the star, rumored to have been involved in extramarital affairs with both John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert F. Kennedy, had taken her own life. Instead, conspiracy theories have long suspected that Marilyn had her life ended by being forced to take the drugs that resulted in her death to keep her from talking about the Kennedy brothers. deaths. Now to this day, the CIA continues to maintain files on Marilyn's death, but it is unlikely anyone will ever know what really happened. Number 4. Death of the Black Dahlia. On January 15th, 1947, Elizabeth Short, an aspiring actor, was found dead in residential Los Angeles. Her body was so mutilated as the body was cut in half and so pale and drained of blood that the woman who discovered it thought she had stumbled upon a mannequin. Now the body was cut with surgical precision, leaving no trauma to internal organs and bones. Her face was also cut from her mouth to ears, leaving an eerie permanent smile. There was no blood on the ground, making it believed that the body was moved after she had died. 9 days after she was discovered, an envelope was sent to the Examiner that read, "The Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers, here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow." Now as promised, the envelope contained her social security card, birth certificate, photographs, names written on pieces of paper, and an address book. Then on March 14th, a note was found saying, "To whom it may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I'm too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that or this. Sorry, Mary." Now although many suspects were named, no authorities were able to identify who ended the Black Dahlia's life. Number 3. Princess Diana's death. Princess Diana was constantly hounded by paparazzi, which resulted in her death. On August 31st, 1997, Diana was fatally injured in a car crash at the Pont de Lama tunnel in Paris. She left the Ritz in Paris at around 12:20 a.m. and her car went into the tunnel, where the driver lost control and crashed into a pillar. Diana was critically injured but died later that morning in the hospital. Now because Diana was so loved and hated by the royals for being so loved, there's a conspiracy theory that the royal family planned for her to die. Now in the months immediately preceding her death, although she was attempting to live her life as normally as she could, even though she got divorced, Diana expressed fears that she would have her life ended, most likely by a staged car crash. The end came in a way similar to how she predicted it, but what we may never know is whether the crash was an accident, as subsequent investigations determined, or staged as she feared. Number 2. Shelley Miscavige disappearance. Shelley Miscavige is a member of the Church of Scientology Sea Org who married Scientology leader David Miscavige. She was last seen in public in August of 2007. Since her disappearance, she has been the subject of speculation and inquiries regarding her whereabouts and well-being. In 2012, attorneys who said they represented her responded by saying that she was merely living a private life devoted to the Church of Scientology. Some former Sea Org members have said that they believe Shelley is being held against her will at the compound of the Scientologist Church of Spiritual Technology Corporation near the mountain town of Running Springs in San Bernardino County, California. In August 2013, actress Leah Remini, a former Scientologist and critic of the organization, filed a missing persons report regarding Shelley with the Los Angeles Police Department, which was closed within hours by the LAPD as unfounded. So where is Shelley? It seems like we might never know. And coming in at number 1 is Elliott Smith's death. Elliott Smith was a musician and singer-songwriter. There was lots of controversy surrounding his death, as it was just strange. Elliott died on October 21st, 2003 from 2 stab wounds to the chest. He was at his apartment where he lived with his girlfriend, Jennifer Chiba. According to Jennifer, the two were arguing and she locked herself in the bathroom to take a shower. She heard him scream and upon opening the door saw Elliott standing with a knife in his chest. She pulled the knife out, after which he collapsed and she called 911. While his death was reported as him taking his own life, the official autopsy report released in December 2003 left open the question of homicide. The report said that he had been stabbed twice, both wounds had entered his chest cavity, and one had perforated his heart. That in itself is not suspicious. Gruesome as it sounds, people who choose to stab themselves to death frequently jab the weapon into their chest a number of times. Elliott, however, had no hesitation wounds, cuts made as the victim works up the nerve to force the weapon through, and he had stabbed himself through his clothing. The autopsy also found small lacerations on both of his hands and under his right arm, which it described as possible defensive wounds. Claim that Jennifer reported removal of the knife from Elliott and subsequent refusal to speak with detectives were all of concern.
Starting us off at number 10 is the Devil's Bible, also known as the Codex Gigas. Back in the 13th century, there was a monk who was sentenced to be walled up alive because he broke his sacred vows. Obviously, this guy wasn't a fan of dying, so what did he do? He promised the monastery that if they let him live, he would write a book that would contain all human knowledge in a day. Yikes. that might be worse than death. In order to fulfill his promise, he sold his soul to the devil himself. Supposedly, this devil's Bible contained a complete Latin translation of the Bible and multiple other texts, such as medical formulas and even instructions for performing exorcisms. This book was created using more than 160 animal skins and apparently takes 2 people just to lift it. Although, mysteriously, this book became a bit lighter because 12 pages are actually missing. Rumor has it, these pages contain satanic rituals to summon the devil himself. Of course, there is no way in knowing unless we read it for ourselves, so if any of you hardcore readers out there get a chance to take a peek, let me know in the comments. Coming in at number 9 is the Nazca Lines. Most of us have heard of crop circles before, but what about the Nazca Lines? The Nazca Lines, just like crop circles, are actually named geoglyphs. Now, what is a geoglyph? A geoglyph is a large design produced on the ground and usually formed by clastic rocks, stones, stone fragments, and gravel or earth. The Nazca Lines were first discovered in the 1930s when pilots were flying over the Nazca Desert in southern Peru and came across these massive drawings. The ancient Nazca civilization made up these drawings consisting of animals, humans, and plants around 2,000 years ago. There are said to be over 100 of these drawings spanning a total of 50 square kilometers. And while many can identify who and what created these massive drawings, no one alive actually knows the reason behind them. Scholars theorize that these were massive signs to give incoming sailors directions, or that they were a way to communicate with those above us. Dun dun dun! Here at number 8 we have the Roman dodecahedrons. All over the world for hundreds of years, random stone and bronze objects have been popping up in fields and sometimes even in people's yards. These objects are called the Roman dodecahedrons. These objects have 12 sides with a small circle on each and pegs sticking out of every single corner. Experts have dated these objects all the way back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, but once again, they have no idea of their purpose. Many believe these objects resemble an ancient nautical devices, or were used to sow winter grains or even calibrate water pipes for Roman architects. In the end, all of these are just theories and cannot be told for sure. So maybe go and invest in a metal detector and see what you can find. At number 7, we have the King List. Dating all the way back to the 3rd millennium BCE, this giant slab known as the King List lists all of the Sumerian kings with their respective dynasties, locations, and the times they were in power. This may not seem like much of a mystery to you, but the mystery isn't the list of the Sumerian kings on the slab, but what is actually included in the list of kings. There are mythological events inscribed on the slab, as well as the events of the Great Flood and the tales of Gilgamesh, meaning that the stories from the Old Testament could indeed be true and that the kings included on the list were actually gods or demigods. Hopefully all that power didn't go to their heads.
Coming in at number 6 we have the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most elusive serial killers in modern American history. The mystery male murdered at least 5 people, but claims to be behind the deaths of up to 37 people. Despite no arrests, the California Department of Justice has maintained an open case file on the Zodiac murders since 1969. The Zodiac Killer murdered 3 women and 1 man, with 2 other male victims surviving. The killer claimed to have killed many people in the infamous ciphers, which were sent to the police. The Zodiac Killer was given their name as a result of the cryptograms sent to the police, which were a mystery unto themselves. One of those has definitely been solved, but the others not so much. The last known Zodiac murder was in the 1970s, so in theory the killer could be dead, or they could be living out their days among us, which is terrifying. So yeah, despite descriptions of the male killer at the time and many sketches of him, the case is unsolved and the murderer is, or was, at large. This is so mysterious. At number 5 we have the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. Who was the Phantom Slayer? Honestly, we don't know. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders were a series of very grisly killings that took place in Texas in the spring of 1946. 8 people were attacked over 10 weeks, with 5 of the victims succumbing to their injuries. A pair of survivors claimed that the killer was wearing a white pillowcase with eye holes cut out over his head. What a ghoul. All of the attacks happened to couples and took place on weekends. The murders sent the town of Texarkana into absolute panic, as I'm sure you can imagine. City inhabitants locked themselves indoors with guns, and it was kinda like scenes from The Purge out there. The Texas Rangers were even called in, and people started arming up and taking to the streets to try and catch the killer, but the assailant never struck again. At the time, the Texas Ranger captain saw that the criminal killer was, and I quote, a shrewd criminal who left no stone unturned to conceal his identity and activities. He was never caught. Coming into number 4 we have the Dark Deaths of Overton Bridge. I've never heard of a dog taking their own life until now, but it seems that there's a bridge in Dumbarton in beautiful, beautiful Scotland which is A, haunted, and B, has claimed the lives of many dogs. This makes me feel really sad. It seems that since the 1960s, nearly 100 dogs have leapt to their death from the bridge, falling 50 feet into jagged rock below. Why the dogs have jumped? We just don't know. Reportedly, they freak out and they leap. The Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals has sent teams to investigate, but nobody has yet solved the mystery. While the dog deaths are the main issue, it seems that a man inexplicably threw his baby from the bridge in 1994. Now dogs are firmly required to be on leashes. Coming into number 3, we have the Phoenix Lights. What was going on in the skies of Arizona, Nevada, and Sonora? In 1997, thousands of people saw what they thought were UFOs in the sky between 7:30 and 10 p.m. at night. Thousands of people reported triangular formations of lights passing over the southern states and in North Mexico. A sizable number of people also reported actually seeing a UFO. One witness, who didn't want to be named, which I kind of understand, said, "It was totally silent. I've never seen anything close to the colors from the exhaust that propelled that thing. It was as big as downtown Prescott and completely blocked out the stars." Now, the shared phenomenon actually had a lot of credible witnesses, including the Arizona Governor Fife Symington. While the original event happened 22 years ago, possible reoccurrences have happened in 2007 and 2008. Coming into number 2, we have the case of D.B. Cooper. On November the 24th, 1971, the eve of Thanksgiving, a man using the name Dan Cooper successfully hijacked a Boeing 727 plane in the airspace between Portland and Seattle. The man boarded the plane as a passenger and ordered a bourbon and soda. After takeoff, he handed a note to a flight attendant, but she didn't read it, assuming it was his phone number. Creepy. He then leant over to her and said, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Not what you want to hear. Long story short, he demanded and successfully extorted $200,000 in ransom, over $1 million in today's currency. He then parachuted out of the plane, jettisoned, gone. Nobody knew whether he landed alive or where he was at all. There was an extensive manhunt from the FBI, but the man's real identity has never been solved. Numerous theories were circulated. The serial number on the cash he stole were also released and searched for, but again, no trace was found. As of 2016, the investigation has been suspended and remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Finally, coming into number 1, a mystery of our age, we have the disappearance of flight MH370. Malaysian Airlines 370 disappeared on March the 8th, 2014, flying from Kuala Lumpur Airport to Beijing in China. The aircraft last made contact with air traffic control when it was over the South China Sea, less than an hour after takeoff, before then completely disappearing from their radar. The last words from Captain Shah were, "Good night, Malaysian 370. The plane was still tracked on military radar, which suggested that actually it deviated to cross the Malay Peninsula, until finally disappearing from radar altogether over the Andaman Sea. Oddly, no phone calls of distress or signals were sent out or anything like that. No word. Silence. The black box could have shed light on what happened, but it was never found. Neither was the plane or its wreckage, despite millions of dollars being spent on finding it. So what happened? Alien abduction? ISIS abduction? It simply disappeared into a parallel universe? We just don't know. Do you guys have any answers to these mysteries? And again, don't forget to let me know what the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you is.
Coming in at number 10 is Russell and Shirley Dermond, Georgia. In May 2014, elderly couple Russell and Shirley Dermond were expected to attend a party for the 2014 Kentucky Derby with their neighbors, who grew concerned when the couple did not show up. On May 6th, when the neighbors went into their house to check on them, the neighbor found the door unlocked and entered the house. Russell's decapitated body was found on the floor of his 2-car garage, lying in a small pool of blood. When police were unable to locate Shirley inside the house, they initially suspected that she had been kidnapped. 10 days later, Shirley's body was found by a fisherman on Lake Oceanee. An autopsy found that she died from either 2 or 3 deep wounds to the head from a blunt object. Now, Russell's head has never been found, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Number 9. Josh Maddox, Colorado. On May 8, 2008, Josh Maddox left the house, telling his sister Kate that he was going out for a walk. He often went out hiking alone, so when his sister saw him at the house before he left, she thought little of it. But when he failed to return later that evening, his family became worried. On May 13th, 5 days after he disappeared, his father, Mike, called the police to report Josh missing. The authorities, friends, and family scoured the neighborhood and nearby Parkland area where Josh may have decided to go walking. After months of searching, nothing had been uncovered and hopes faded. Then, 7 years later, in August 2015, less than a mile away from Josh's home, property developer Chuck Murphy was demolishing an old wood cabin to make way for 32 new family homes. Now, the cabin had been used in years and the inside was damp and rotten. Work to demolish the chimney inside the cabin started, and to the surprise of the demolition team, crammed inside the brickwork was a mummified body, which was later confirmed as Josh's. His body was naked apart from a thin shirt, and his clothes were neatly stacked inside the cabin. Now, an autopsy found no evidence of any drugs in Josh's remains. He said, "The heart tissue showed no signs of trauma, there were no broken bones, no knife marks, there were no bullet holes. There is so far no answers to a number of things. It is very confusing. It was not an instant death." It seems like we might never know what happened to Josh that fateful day. Number 8. Dan Cooper, U.S. airspace. Now, one of the most famous heists in history occurred on November 24th, 1971, when a man who identified himself as Dan Cooper bought a one-way ticket to Seattle on Northwest Orient Airlines from Portland, Oregon. After the plane was airborne, Dan handed the flight attendant a note. Now, at first, she just put it in her pocket without looking at it, but then he told her, "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a..." He then opened a briefcase to reveal red-colored sticks surrounded by an array of wires. He told the flight attendant to write down everything he was saying and then take it to the captain. The note said, "I want $200,000 by 5 p.m. in cash exclusively in $20 bills, put in a knapsack. I want 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes. When we land, I want a fuel truck ready to refuel. No funny stuff or I'll do the job." FBI agents assembled the ransom money, and Seattle police obtained the parachutes from a local skydiving school. When Dan claimed his demands were met, he allowed all passengers and some of the crew to exit the airplane. He told the remaining crew to refuel the plane and chart a course for Mexico City while staying below 10,000 feet. Then, somewhere between Seattle and Roanoke, he jumped from the plane with the money and was never seen again. Now, despite an expansive manhunt and over 45 years of searching, no conclusions have been made as to the man's identity or his fate after he jumped. Today, it is called one of the greatest cold cases in FBI and US history. Number 7. The Zodiac, California. The Zodiac took the lives of 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969. Now, he coined this name in a series of taunting letters and cards that he mailed to regional newspapers. Now, some of the letters included cryptograms or ciphers in which he claimed that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. Now, he targeted young couples and a lone male cab driver. 2 of his wounded victims survived, and the Zodiac would attempt to end the lives of a couple on a hillside at Lake Berryessa, but only the woman would succumb to her injuries. The man would live to tell the story of what happened and give his creepy description of the hooded serial slayer. Now, the Zodiac claimed to have taken the lives of 37 victims and has been linked to several other cold cases, some in Southern California or outside the state. While many theories regarding the identity of the Zodiac have been suggested, the only suspect authorities ever publicly named was Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher who died in 1992.
At number 6, we have the Antikythera mechanism. Back in 1900, a group of sponge divers discovered a shipwreck in the Mediterranean dating all the way back to 70 to 60 BCE. These divers salvaged 3 pieces of bronze making up what is now known as the Antikythera mechanism. This shoebox-sized artifact stunned scholars for over a century due to the fact that the object's gears and internal mechanisms were far beyond any of the known Greek tech of the time. Some even believe that this object is proof of ancient aliens' visitations to Earth. Although in the late 20th century, X-rays showed that the object is designed to track astronomical movements and was confirmed later by CT scans that revealed inscriptions for what was basically an ancient computer. While the object's use has now been confirmed, what is still puzzling is the advanced construction and precision of this tool that is believed to be way more advanced than what was available at the time. I don't know. If you ask me, I say aliens. At number 5, we have the stone spheres of Costa Rica. Ever since the 1940s, scientists have been digging up these ancient mysterious spheres in the Dicus Delta of Costa Rica. Originally discovered by agricultural forays by the United Fruit Company, small stone spheres ranging from a few centimeters wide to 2 meters in diameter and weighing over 16 tons have been popping up everywhere in the Dicus Delta. Every single one of these spheres is man-made and made up of an igneous stone known as granodiorite. Many of these stone spheres have been moved to high-profile locations throughout Costa Rica, and some are even now privately owned. Everyone seems to love them for their decoration, but the coolest thing about them is that absolutely no one knows why, how, or who made these strange objects. Seems to be a common theme, huh? At number 4, we have the bog bodies of Northern Europe. Ever since the 18th century, hundreds and hundreds of well-preserved human bodies have been discovered in the peat bogs of Northern Europe. Some of these bodies have been dated all the way back to 8000 BCE. Some of you may be familiar with the famous Toland Man, who was discovered back in 1950 by 2 Danish farmers in a small town in Denmark. The Toland Man is believed to be from the pre-Roman Iron Age of the 3rd century BCE. His body was so well preserved that scientists were able to look at the contents of his stomach to determine where he lived. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dewey, this sounds amazingly gross and cool, but where's the mystery, my dude? Well, I'm glad you asked. All of the bodies that have been found have no explanation as to why they were placed in the bogs, nor why this way of disposal would be utilized. There are only speculations that these people were either sacrifices or social outcasts who were fated to meet their doom. Wow. And I thought high school kids were mean. Coming in at number 3 is the underwater ruins of Japan. Just under the surface off the coast of Yonaguni-jima is Japan's very own Atlantis. First discovered back in 1995, divers and researchers believed the findings to be nothing more than just a series of weird rock formations that included straight lines and right angles. Later, there were researchers that discovered a large stone gateway, carved stairways, and streets to huge vaulting towers. Many believe the underwater mystery to be the fallen city of the Jomon people. Experts believe that the city didn't fall into the sea like other fabled underwater cities, but actually slowly submerged over thousands of years. It is believed that this site could hold secrets and answers to all of the other theorized underwater cities around the world, such as Atlantis. Now, we could continue to theorize, or we could just believe that Aquaman, starring Jason Momoa, is actually a documentary and he currently does live in the ocean. I can see it. At number 2, we have the Piri Reis map. In 1929, this old map was found in the Sultan's palace in Istanbul, Turkey. A legendary commander of the Ottoman fleet by the name of Piri Reis, who lived from 1465 to 1553, is the author of the map. Reis's map is extremely precise. So precise that it actually includes the continent of Antarctica. But wait, hold the phone. Antarctica wasn't discovered until 1773 by British Captain James Cook. But yet, here is Piri Reis's map showing Antarctica back in 1513. Was Antarctica actually just discovered much earlier than originally thought? Or did James Cook just take credit for someone else's hard work? We might never know. Finally, coming in at number 1 is the infamous Big Daddy Stonehenge. In case you've been living under a prehistoric rock for the last few thousand years, you've probably heard of Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a giant prehistoric monument that is located in England and dates back to 3000 BC. The monument consists of a ring of standing stones all weighing around 25 ton, originally from a quarry located 25 kilometers or 15.53 miles away from the current monument. Not one person knows how these ancient people could have moved these massive stones without the use of a wheel or pulley, or why they were even formed in the first place. Is it an ancient observatory? Healing place? Did ancient aliens create it as a landing pad? We may never actually know.
Starting off this countdown, we have Yuki Onishi. Her case is often referred to as the girl that vanished into thin air, and you'll understand why in a second. On April 29th, 2005, 5-year-old Yuki was out celebrating Greenery Day with her mother. Greenery Day is a national holiday in Japan meant to appreciate nature. On this day, people often go and dig up bamboo shoots as part of the celebration, and that's what Yuki and her mom were doing along with 60 other people. After Yuki showed her mom the first shoot that she found, she ran off to find more. 20 minutes later, her mom realized that Yuki wasn't with all the other diggers. That's when the search began. When they couldn't find her, the police were called and police dogs came to sniff out the scene. This is where it gets strange. All the police dogs followed her scent to the middle of the forest where her scent just stopped. This made it seem like she vanished into thin air from that spot. Sadly, Yuki has never been found and we don't know what happened to her. or where she disappeared to. Moving on to number 9, we have the Pyramid Mystery. If you're a fan of the lost city of Atlantis, then this might be the mystery for you. There is a city that lies sunken underwater just off the coast of the Japanese island Yonaguni. Many believe that the city is around 5,000 years old. There are complete pyramids, ruins of castles, structures etched with faces, and rock sculptures that look like animals, all underwater. It's theorized that a terrible earthquake caused the city to be engulfed by water, but to this day, we don't know the true origins of this mysterious underwater city. Moving on at number 8, we have the Man with 21 Faces. In the 1980s in Japan, a group who called themselves the Mystery Man with 21 Faces stocked supermarkets with cyanide-filled candy. It all started when they kidnapped Katsuhisa Izaki, the president of a major company that was famous for selling sweets. They kidnapped him from his home and demanded a ransom of 1 billion yen. Thankfully, he escaped. But that was just the beginning. They continued by targeting other companies and by putting cyanide-laced chocolates on supermarket shelves. They also wrote several taunting letters to the police. To this day, no one knows who they were. The case was closed in February of 2000 and no arrests were ever made. Making our way down the list at number 7, we have the chain suicides. Okay, this one is a super mysterious case. Between June and July of 1992, 5 people all committed suicide in Kumatori, Osaka. 3 of the people were friends, and apparently several months prior to their death, 2 of their other friends died in what was deemed as accidental deaths. All 7 of these deaths happened within 0.7 miles from each other. Now, what's weird is how the deaths look like staged suicides. One person was hanging from a tree, but police couldn't find what the person stood on to reach the tree. And then one girl had a stab wound to the neck and chest, which police say is odd. Lastly, some of these victims all reported that they were being stalked prior to their death. Although we don't know who committed these crimes or why, it seems like the group of friends were targeted and then killed.
Number 6. Amber Hagerman, Texas. A young Amber Hagerman was riding her bicycle in a parking lot of an abandoned grocery store in Arlington, Texas on January 13th, 1996 when she was kidnapped. A witness told police that he saw a man get out of a black pickup truck, grab her off the bicycle, and forced her into his truck as she kicked and screamed. Now, despite the massive search, she wasn't found, and then 4 days later, a man walking his dog found Amber's body in a creek about 4 miles from where she was abducted. Autopsy reports revealed that she had died of cut wounds to the neck. Now, as of January of last year, police have received and investigated more than 7,000 tips related to the case. I miss her every day, and she's just so full of life, and I want to know why. Why her? She was only a little girl, Amber's mother, Donna Williams, said last year. Now, police say there is limited evidence in the case, but they hope that the new DNA technologies can help them catch who was responsible. Now, her abduction led to the invention of Amber Alerts, and although some people might think they're annoying, they do save lives. Number 5. Tylenol poisoning, Illinois. On September 29, 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area ingested poisoned Tylenol pills, consequently collapsing and dying shortly after. Now, bottles of the popular pain and fever reliever were spiked with cyanide and returned to store shelves, targeting random people. After all the victims were buried on October 1st, 1982, it was revealed that the Tylenol bottles were intentionally poisoned. Immediately, over 31 million bottles of Tylenol were recalled by the manufacturer and were issued warnings. They also offered to replace recalled bottles with new bottles and offered a $100,000 reward to anyone who may have any information on the perpetrator. Now, these precautions cost the company over $100 million, and there were several more copycat deaths across the United States after the initial incident had occurred. Now, this led to the invention of the safety seals that you see on medicine bottles today, and to this day, no suspect has ever been charged or convicted of poisonings. Number 4. The Axeman, New Orleans. From 1918 to 1919, the Axeman of New Orleans ended the lives of 6 people and left 6 more severely injured. An Italian grocery store owner and his wife were the first victims. They were found in bed at home with their throats cut and skulls bashed in with an axe. The victims who followed were also found in bed, and no valuable belongings were taken. A newspaper received a letter with demands for the following Tuesday night that said, "I am very fond of jazz music. and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home jazz band plays in full swing at the time I've just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of you people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. Now on that Tuesday night, the streets of New Orleans filled with jazz and nobody was harmed. Then in October 1919, the deaths ended just as quickly as they had begun, and the criminal was never found. Number 3. Jeanette DePalmer, New Jersey. In 1972, in Springfield, New Jersey, a dog brought a decomposing forearm to its owner. They quickly alerted the police, and this prompted a police search, and a body was soon found on a cliff. The body was identified as Jeanette DePalmer, a girl who was missing for 6 weeks. Now, the hill where she was discovered was covered with occult symbols, and many were led to believe that her body was placed on a makeshift altar. Many locals and even some police officers pointed their fingers at an alleged coven of witches who were rumored to have used Jeanette for a human sacrifice, and others said it was a satanic group. Now, reports from local papers mentioned the police couldn't determine the cause of death due to the body's decomposition, and authorities investigated a local homeless man who was a prime suspect, only to find no connection to the crime. Many believe that Jeanette may have provoked a group of Satan-worshipping teens at her high school, since she was involved with a group that helped drug addicts find their faith in Christ. Now, to this day, her death remains unsolved. Number 2. Brooklyn Farthing, Kentucky. On June 21st, 2013, Brooklyn Farthing, her younger sister Paige, and cousin went to a field party. Paige and Brooklyn's cousin decided to leave the party early on, while Brooklyn had been plans to sleep over at a friend's house who was also at the party, so she was going to stay. However, when Brooklyn's friend decided she wanted to spend the night at a boy's house, the two argued and the friend left. Now, towards the end of the party, Brooklyn was seen leaving with 2 young men, and one of the men was dropped off, but the other man took Brooklyn to his house. It was at around 4 a.m. on June 22nd that Brooklyn called Paige and asked if their cousin could come pick her up. However, the cousin had had too many drinks and was in no condition to drive. Now, Brooklyn didn't want her mother to have to come get her, so she called her ex-boyfriend. He agreed to give her a ride home when he got off work. It was at this point that the man who brought Brooklyn to the house left. Now, before long, Brooklyn's ex-boyfriend received several texts from her saying, "Can you hurry, please hurry, and then I'm scared." Then another text came in telling the ex to never mind and that Brooklyn was going to another party. He asked who she was going with, but there was no response, and Brooklyn hasn't been heard from or seen since. And coming in at number 1 is Tara Calico, New Mexico. On the morning of September 20th, 1988 in Bella, New Mexico, Tara Calico borrowed her mother's pink bike to go out for a ride. She planned to play tennis that afternoon and asked her mom to drive out after her in case she got a flat tire and didn't return home by noon. Now, she never did return, and no one knew what happened to her. Every lead went dead until about a year later, when a photo was found depicting a young woman, her age, and a missing boy, both gagged. The Polaroid photograph was found in a parking lot outside a junior food store in Florida. Michael Henley went missing in the same area as Tara in April of 1988 when he was hunting turkeys with his father. Now, they appear to be in the back of a van with a copy of a book written by V.C. Andrews, Tara's favorite author, lying right beside the girl. Now, initially, Tara's mother didn't think the girl was her, but the girl in the photograph had a scar identical to Tara's. In 1990, Michael Henley's body was found in Zuni Mountains where he was hunting, which strongly disconnected the theory that the two were abducted and taken to Florida, but unfortunately Tara's parents would eventually die, never finding out who took their daughter.
At number 10 is the Axeman of New Orleans. In the annals of American crime, one chilling tale that sends shivers down your spine is the Axeman of New Orleans. This elusive and malevolent figure terrorized the city during a horrifying spree that left a trail of gruesome unaliving. The Axeman's modus of operandi was brutal as it was perplexing, breaking into homes, wielding an axe or razor, and butchering his victims. What's truly unsettling is that these unalivings don't appear to have any clear motive. The victims were predominantly Italian immigrants or Italian Americans, sparking theories of ethnic hatred. But the mystery deepens when some suggest that the Axeman may have just been a sadistic fiend who specifically targeted women. And here's where it gets truly bizarre. There's even a theory that he eliminated to promote jazz music. What? A letter attributed to the Axeman claimed that he'd spare anyone with a jazz band playing in their home on a specific night. Are you serious? And New Orleans heeded that call. Jazz echoed throughout the city, and that night, no one fell victim to the Axeman's gruesome acts. What? To this day, the identity of the Axeman remains unsolved. At number 9 is the Cleveland Torso Unaliver. Active between 1935 and 1938, this unidentified serial killer left a trail of grisly unalivings in their wake. Officially, they claimed about a dozen victims, but there could be way more. What makes this case even more unsettling is the gruesome way the unaliver operated. They beheaded and often dismembered their victims, and sometimes even severed torsos and appendages. Most of the male victims were castrated. The cause of the unaliving in many cases was the horrific dismembering itself, meaning that the people were alive as it was happening. Oh lord. The victims were often drifters, folks who lived on the fringes of society during the Great Depression. Their identities were hard to establish, which was a common theme for this enigma. Forensic science in the era was far from what it is today, making it even more challenging to identify the victims, especially since the heads were often missing. But here's the twist. The Cleveland Torso Unaliver had the audacity to taunt law enforcement. They sent postcards and even placed remains where the authorities couldn't miss them, right in front of Elliot Ness's office. Ness, who was famous for taking on Al Capone and led the Untouchables, couldn't crack this case. To this day, the identity of the Cleveland Torso Unaliver remains a haunting mystery. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Most Amazing, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is the Zodiac Unaliver. This unidentified serial unaliver operated in the late 1960s, plunging Northern California into a state of fear and panic. What sets this case apart is its brazen nature as the unaliver's penchant for taunting the media and authorities. He struck in various locations, targeting young couples and even a lone cab driver. But here's the truly unsettling part. The Zodiac claimed to have unalived over 37 people, leaving a trail of cryptic letters, some containing still unsolved ciphers. Only one of these ciphers was cracked in 2020. It's a real-life puzzle that the world is desperately trying to solve. Though Arthur Lee Allen, a former teacher and convicted offender, was named as a suspect, the case remains unsolved. The Zodiac's eerie ability to vanish into obscurity has made it an eerie mystery, with investigations still open to this day. Will we ever unmask the infamous Zodiac? Only time will tell. At number 7 is Bible John, who operated in Glasgow back in 1968 and 69. But what's so baffling about this case, you ask? Well, it's the fact that this guy managed to off 3 people without ever getting caught. All of his victims were brunettes between the ages of 25 and 32. They all crossed paths with their sinister dance partner at the Barlow Land Ballroom, a place for fun and music that turned into a nightmarish crime scheme. But it didn't stop there, folks. This guy was called Bible John because he had a knack for quoting scripture and condemning adultery, especially when he was with his last victim. The police have never been able to pin down his identity, despite one of the most extensive manhunts in history. And what's even more mind-boggling is that some folks even thought Peter Taubin, another convicted serial unaliver, might be Bible John, but nope, he got eliminated as a suspect, and the mystery lingers on.
In our 6th spot, we have Body in the Bag. On April 21st, 1996, a group of students were headed home from school when they saw a bag in a bamboo grove. They had seen the bag there before. In fact, it was said to have been there for about a month. They decided to finally see what's inside. When they poked it with a stick, a human hand fell out of it. The bag had the remains of a middle-aged man shoved into it. He had bruises all over his waist and some of his teeth were missing. Police were unable to identify the man or figure out what happened to him. To this day, police keep a sign near the area where the man's body was found, with hopes that someone will be able to identify him. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Tsunami family murder. On April 28th, 1995, at around 2:30 a.m., the house belonging to 70-year-old Haru Heiko and 67-year-old Midori Tsunami was set on fire. Police later found their bodies on the 1st floor. They were both decapitated. Haruki had a knife in his stomach and Midori had stab marks all over her body. What sucks is that the fire destroyed most of the evidence in the house, but it's said that the killer stayed in the house for at least 5 hours after they killed them. Police still don't know who committed this crime, and after years of searching, they still haven't been able to locate the couple's heads. Coming in at number 4, we have Yoko Yoshida. On September 29th, 2000, a worker at a Tokyo apartment complained to management about a bad odor coming from one of the apartments. When they went inside, 28-year-old Yoko Yoshida was found dead laying on her bed. Now, Yoko was a well-known manga artist. Autopsy reports claim that she had been strangled to death and had been laying there her for 10 days or more before they found her. What's odd about her case is that 3 million yen was found in her wallet. Police believe that Yoko knew who her killer was. Maybe she was killed out of jealousy because of her success. Another theory is that since she was a well-known manga artist, that she was killed by a crazed fan, but we still don't truly know. In our third spot, we have the 42nd disappearance. On March 7th, 1989, 4-year-old Shinya Matsuka was said to be kidnapped from her front lawn. Shinya and her family were returning home from a walk. She was outside on the front yard alone for about 40 seconds while her parents carried her younger sibling inside. When they returned, she was gone. It all happened so fast. Their life completely changed in that 40 seconds. Over the years, people have claimed to have seen her, but police have made nothing of these leads. This remains one of the most mysterious cases in Japan. In our second spot, we have the money heist. On December 10th, 1968, a man dressed as a police officer managed to successfully steal more than 294 million yen. So on this day, a car belonging to a bank was transporting that money to another location. That's when a man dressed as a police officer stopped the truck. He then told the workers that their branch manager's home was just blown up, and he had reason to believe that this truck was rigged with explosives as well. The police officer crawled under the vehicle to search for a bomb, and he set off a flare that caused smoke and flames to emerge under the vehicle. The workers panicked and backed away, thinking that the car was going to explode. This allowed the officer to hop into the car and drive away with the money. Police had no suspects, but it's thought that he was a corrupt cop or son of a cop. But these are just theories. They were never able to catch this man. In December of 1975, the statute of limitations for the case passed. So even if a man did come forward admitting to the crime, they wouldn't be able to arrest him for it. And in our number one spot, we have the Miyazawa family massacre. On December 30th, 2000, the Miyazawa family, consisting of Miyakio, Yasuko, and their children, Nina and Ri, were all stabbed or strangled to death. It's said that the killer entered their home through the upstairs window. On December 31st, Yasuko's mother visited the home and found her daughter, along with her family, dead. However, the killer has never been identified. Now, this case is truly frustrating. There was so much evidence and DNA left behind by the killer, yet they were still never able to catch him. Apparently, the killer stayed in the house several hours after killing the family. He used the bathroom and didn't flush the toilet. He ate their food from the kitchen and used their computer and even left behind his clothes. But still, he was never caught. And police officers don't even know why he killed the family in the first place. But there are a couple of theories. One is that they were killed by a motorcycle game when Mikio apparently told them off for being too loud several days before. Another theory is that they were killed by a serial killer that would use Japan's train service to get around and commit different crimes. And the last theory is that they were killed by an American soldier. Sadly, to this day, we truly don't know who the monster behind this ruthless crime is.